Imagine possessing a power so immense it could threaten the entire world. A power so terrifying it could bend it to your will. Have you imagined it? Then let the story begin. On one quiet night, there was a young man working at a library. He had just finished his shift while his colleagues were preparing to leave. They said, "Come on, let's leave together." But with a gentle smile, he replied, "No worries, I'll stay a little longer. It's not like anyone's waiting for me at home." He sat alone, speaking to himself for a while, then gathered his belongings and set out on his way home. But as he walked through the quiet streets, a speeding car struck him. He fell to the ground, his breath fading away, until suddenly he opened his eyes again. But it wasn't the same world. He awoke in another realm, inside the body of a small child, carried in the arms of an old man, standing in front of a wrecked carriage. Years passed, and the child grew older. He came to be known as Shin Wolfordo, named after the elderly man who had saved him and raised him in his home. It was a completely different world, one where people used magic as naturally as breathing. Shin retained the memories of his previous life, though he still didn't know how he had died or why he had been reincarnated into this world. One day, when Shin returned to his adoptive grandfather, the old man Merlin was stunned. Shin had successfully hunted down a wild boar, and he was only 8 years old. When Merlin asked him to demonstrate his fire magic, he was utterly astonished by Shin's overwhelming power. Soon after, Melda and Michelle visited Merlin's house. Melda was completely shocked to learn that Shin had taken down a wild boar, but Shin humbly explained that it was thanks to the gear she had crafted for him, which had made his movements far more agile. Miko, on the other hand, was the mentor who had trained Shin in the art of swordsmanship, teaching him how to wield a blade and fight properly. 2 years later, Merlin decided it was time to teach Shin the art of tracking magic, allowing him to locate demons nearby. He warned him of how dangerous these creatures could be, but as soon as Shin tried the technique, Merlin was left speechless. Shin had mastered it on his very first attempt. Without hesitation, Shin detected a nearby demon and immediately rushed toward it with the intent to destroy it. Upon reaching the site, he didn't wait for Merlin to catch up. He charged in and vanquished the demon in mere seconds. Merlin could only stand in awe, realizing just how quickly Shin's power was evolving, growing more fearsome with each passing day. Later, back at home, Merlin spoke to Melda about how fast Shin was developing and how powerful he would become in the future. Both Merlin and Melda had come to see Shin as their grandson. Even though he wasn't related to them by blood, eventually Merlin made the decision to tell Shin the truth that he wasn't his real grandfather. But before he could even explain, Shin interrupted him and said, "I've always known." Merlin continued, "Your parents? They were slaughtered in the most brutal way. When I found them, I couldn't even recognize their faces." With a calm smile, Shin replied, "It's all right, Grandpa." Merlin was taken aback. How could Shin be so accepting? Shin looked him in the eyes and said, "I don't feel sadness, because I never knew my real parents. You, Melda, and Michelle, you've always been by my side. I never felt alone. So thank you, Grandpa, for taking me in and raising me." Overwhelmed with emotion, Merlin couldn't hold back his tears. His eyes welled up with joy and gratitude for Shin's sincere, heartfelt words. When Shin turned 15, Merlin's friends gathered at his home to celebrate the occasion. During the gathering, King Decium asked him, "What are your plans now, young man? What do you intend to do with your life?" But Shin had yet to make up his mind. It's worth noting that Decium was actually the king of a country called Earlshide, though Shin was unaware of this fact at the time. After the pleasant gathering, Merlin took them to Shin's training grounds, which they reached through a magical portal resembling teleportation. Everyone stood in awe, for none of them had ever witnessed such a type of magic in their world, and what they saw was only the beginning. Shin was about to show them the unimaginable. Merlin gathered them and said to Shin, "Come on, hero, show them the spell." Shin looked at him in confusion and asked, "What spell?" Merlin smiled and replied, "The spell. Yes, that spell." Shin began to visualize the form and scale of the spell, while everyone watched anxiously. Suddenly, blue flames emerged from his hand, flames no one had ever seen before. In a single instant, Shin struck with his hand, triggering a massive explosion that rocked the entire area, astonishing everyone with his extraordinary combat power. Milda, clinging to Merlin, shouted, "What on earth are you teaching this boy, you useless old man?" Milda, by the way, is Merlin's wife. They returned home, and there, King Decium began speaking to Shin, warning him that if other nations were to discover his magical power, the world would be thrown into chaos. Shin stood bewildered, unable to grasp what was happening around him. After a long discussion, the king came to a firm decision. Shin must enroll in a magic academy to comprehend the extent of his power and discover how his magic differed from others. Shin, surprised, asked innocently, "Your country? What do you mean?" "I don't understand, Sir Decium." At that moment, Decium revealed his true identity. "I am the third king of the kingdom of Earlshide." Shin was stunned. Events were escalating rapidly, and it turned out that everyone around him held prestigious positions. Even Michael, who had been training him in swordsmanship, was actually the commander of the Royal Knights. In the midst of this shock, Shin asked the king, "How do you know my grandfather?" Desium replied, "The first time a demonoid appeared, I was on the battlefield. The demon was unbelievably powerful and wiped out our army in seconds. When my turn came and I was on the verge of death, Marlin and Milda rushed through the flames and saved me. Since then, we've been close friends, and I continue to visit them often." It was revealed that Marlin and Milda were extremely famous in the capital. Later, they boarded a carriage headed to the capital. As soon as they arrived and the people recognized the wise man and the wise woman, crowds rushed toward them, for they bore these titles after saving both the kingdom and the king from the threat of demons. They reached their mansion in the capital, an enormous house that left Shin amazed. "It seems Grandpa and Grandma really are famous," he thought to himself. He settled in and was later invited to take a walk around the capital. While walking, he saw a group of young men harassing some girls. Without hesitation, he intervened and taught them a harsh lesson. The girls thanked Shin for his courage and chivalry, and one of them said to him, "O moon, descend and let this young man take your place." Her words touched Shin deeply, and his heart almost leapt from his chest. They all sat at a small cafe to get to know each other. The first girl was named Maria, and the second, Cicely. From their conversation, Shin learned that they would both be enrolling in the same magic academy he was about to join. The girls were utterly shocked when they found out Shin would be attending the academy as well. They had expected someone with his combat skills to join the knights directly, not a mere school. It seemed they were kind-hearted and unaware of the true situation. Maria seemed particularly impressed by the wise man and wise woman, saying, "If their grandson is going to attend the magic academy, then he must be amazing like them." Shin felt flustered and chose not to reveal his identity. After saying goodbye, he left. But it was clear that Cicely had fallen for Shin at first sight, and Maria teasingly tried to poke fun at her feelings. The day of the entrance ceremony at the Magic Academy finally arrived. This academy upheld a strict law. No member of royalty or nobility was allowed to use their status or power over others. Here, everyone was equal, whether rich or poor. As Shin checked the board for his class assignment, a young nobleman stood behind him and barked arrogantly, "Move out of my way." He placed his hand on Shin's shoulder to shove him aside, but without hesitation. Shin threw him to the ground. The noble shouted, "Do you even know who I am? You think you can challenge me and get away with it?" But before he could finish, a voice came from behind him. "In this academy, everyone is equal. Using your family's influence is a violation of the rules and is punishable by law. Now get out of my sight." The noble couldn't say a word. He lowered his head and walked away in shame, only for Shin to discover that the one who had spoken was none other than Aug Ars Haido, the son of King Disian himself. Aug approached Shin and struck up a conversation, clearly happy that Shin treated him like a regular friend, not a prince. Nearby, Maria and Cecily watched in disbelief, wondering what kind of relationship Shin had with the royal heir. Then came the entrance exams. First was a written test, followed by a magical power evaluation. Shin was thrilled. It was his first time seeing people his age use magic. But to his surprise, their magic was incredibly weak, and yet they were proud of it. When Shin's turn came, the examiner asked him to destroy the target in front of him, so Shin suppressed his power as much as he could. Even that, the entire purity spoke from the pores of his spell, leaving everyone stunned by his overwhelming magic. Once the exams ended, the results were announced, and Shin ranked first in the entire academy. As the top scorer, he was asked to give a motivational speech to the new students. Meanwhile, both Maria and Cecily had passed as well. Cecily was deeply impressed by Shin. Not only was he physically strong, he was also a magical prodigy. And now, the top of his class. As for the noble who had insulted Shin on the first day, he was furious. He couldn't accept being outdone and started whispering that Shin must have cheated somehow. Around that time, Melda sent Shin a set of special clothes, enchanted with extremely complex magical inscriptions, the kind that were nearly impossible to modify or remove, but Shin, with his incredible power, was able to enhance them even further. When Melda found out what he did, she was shocked. "Don't you dare tell anyone about this. What you did is dangerous. It could lead to disaster." Later, the students gathered for the opening ceremony. As usual, fans surrounded Shin from every direction when his full name was announced, Shin Wolford. Both Maria and Cecily were stunned. They had just realized Shin was the grandson of the wise man and the wise woman. Shin gave his speech, and the students were dismissed to their respective classes. Everything seemed normal until Maria and Cecily approached Shin for help. Maria explained that someone had been harassing Cecily, controlling and threatening her, and they didn't know how to handle it. Shin was instantly angry. Before he could even react, the boys showed up, yelling, "Didn't I tell you not to speak to any other man?" It was the same noble from the first day, Karto. Karto reached for Cecily, but Shin immediately stepped in and blocked him. Karto shouted, "What business do you have with my fiancé?" Shin looked at Cecily and asked, "Is that true?" She replied, "No. I've rejected him so many times, but he keeps trying to force me to accept." Shin said gently, "Don't worry, I'll protect you." But Cardo grinned darkly and said, "Your father works under mine in the company. I could have him fired in seconds." Suddenly, Og's voice echoed from behind. "That's the second time, and now you're threatening her using her father? This won't be ignored. You will be punished." Cardo's face turned pale. He scowled, then stormed off. Og turned to Shin and joked, trying to look cool in front of Cecily. "Huh? Not bad, my friend." Shin then decided to take Maria and Cecily to his house to ask Melda if he could design a magical uniform to protect Cecily. Maria was thrilled. Visiting the home of the wise woman was a rare honor. August joined them as well. At Shin's house, they explained everything that had happened. Melda looked at Cecily and said, "So this is the girl you want to craft a uniform for, Shin? You seem serious about protecting her." Then she turned to Cecily, "But before I make anything, I have a question for you. Do you truly deserve it? You should know, what Shin is crafting is considered a national treasure." Cecily was overwhelmed. Tears welled up in her eyes. "I don't deserve anything. I took advantage of Shin's kindness and asked him to protect me. I can't accept something so valuable." She stood up and turned to leave, but Melda called out to her, "If you had agreed from the beginning, I would have kicked you out. But you seem like a kind and respectful girl. You do deserve it." Shin added, "I never felt like you used me. I was glad you trusted me." Melda apologized for making Cecily feel uncomfortable and hugged her. Cecily couldn't hold back her tears, moved by Melda's warmth. Then, Melda took her to try on the new uniform. Meanwhile, Merlin felt a bit out of place, like he hadn't contributed much, and looked at Shin with a faint smile. Everyone soon gathered and watched Shin inscribe the enchantments on the uniform. They were amazed by his precision and power. Even the king himself said, "What Shin is doing must be kept secret. If the world knew, wars would break out to control him." Afterward, Shin inscribed enchantments on the uniforms of Aug, Cecily, and their friends. As they were about to leave, Shin decided to show them his teleportation magic. He could instantly travel to any place he'd seen before. Everyone was stunned by this ability. And so, an incredible, unforgettable day came to an end. The next day, Shin accompanied Cecily to the academy. Their bond was growing stronger with every passing moment, and it had become clear that love was blossoming between them. Throughout the journey, Shin continuously activated his detection magic, ensuring her safety in case of any sudden ambush. Upon arriving at the academy, a professor welcomed them and guided them on a tour through the various departments and available courses. During the tour, Prince Og suggested that Shin establish his own department, given his overwhelming magical power, which surpassed that of any existing group. The students were thrilled by the idea and immediately expressed their desire to join Shin. At first, Shin rejected the offer, but when Cecily told him she would join him, he changed his mind without hesitation, and so, a new department was born. The Ultimate Magic Division. Meanwhile, back at the royal palace, the king was discussing a growing threat facing the kingdom. The number of demons had been increasing rapidly as of late, threatening the nation's stability. These demons were originally humans, but had mysteriously transformed, and no one knew how or why. Elsewhere, in the mansion of Carto, the noble who had previously insulted Shin, he was being harshly punished by his father for his behavior at the academy. He screamed in rage, "This is all because of Wolford. I won't forgive him. I'll make him pay." His eyes began to shift, slowly turning unnatural, as though something dark was taking hold of him. Upon hearing this, Carto's father struck him with a violent punch and immediately ordered the servants to lock him in his room. When Shin heard what had happened, he felt a sense of relief, knowing Cecily would now be safe. But he didn't stop there. He began investigating Carto's behavior and discovered that everyone agreed Carto had once been a normal, respectful person, until the day he met the teacher named Strom. From that moment on, everything changed. Later, at the Carto household, Strom arrived for a visit. Carto's mother greeted him in tears, pleading, "Please, help my son. I don't know what's happening to him anymore." Strom responded with a sly grin, "Don't worry," and entered the room. Once inside, he cast a spell on Carto that made his eyes glow bright red, an unmistakable sign of demonic transformation. Strom then left the house with a sinister expression, as if everything was unfolding just as he had planned. Back at the academy, Og told Shin that Carto had been disciplined, so there was no longer a need for him to escort Cecily to school, but Shin smiled and said, "We live in the same direction. I don't mind walking her." Cecily stood by his side and nodded, confirming his words. It was a touching moment between the two. As their conversation continued, the group became more curious about Shin's detection magic and how it allowed him to sense any malicious intent nearby, like that of a demon. Everyone was stunned, unsure of how it worked. So, Shin shared his story of how he killed his first demon at the age of 10. The group was left in awe of his strength. He decided to go for a walk outside to stretch and train a bit, but suddenly, Shin sensed a malicious energy approaching fast. In an instant, Kato appeared, now fully transformed, and launched a savage attack. He would have killed them all had Shin not jumped in and deployed a magical barrier just in time. The intensity of the spell burned Shin's entire arm, but thanks to his magical suit, its auto-recovery function activated and began healing the wound on its own. Shin turned to August and commanded firmly, "Take everyone and run, right now." Aug refused, shouting, "We're not leaving you behind. We'll fight together." But Shin barked back, "You'll just get in the way. Take them and go." August, understanding the urgency, followed his orders and escaped with the others, sending 2 students ahead to alert the academy guards. The battle between Shin and Karno began. Kato, completely consumed by rage, roared, "I won't stop until you're a corpse." Shin was shocked. Despite his transformation, Kato could still speak. Shin dodged his attacks and attempted to use magic to bring him back to normal, but Kato's fury only escalated. He unleashed a self-destruction spell, one powerful enough to blow up the entire academy with everyone inside. In that critical moment, Shin had no choice. He charged in with full force and delivered a deadly blow, severing Kato's head and ending his life. Shin stood there, frozen, devastated. It was the first time he had ever taken a human life. Kato hadn't been a demon from the beginning, just someone who lost his way. Soon after, August and the others arrived. They were in disbelief at the level of power Shin had displayed, how he'd single-handedly defeated a human-demon hybrid. Cicely rushed toward him, noticing the dark markings on his face from the excessive magic use. As the students gathered around Shin, the academy guards finally arrived. One of them asked Prince Aug, "Where is the demonic human we were notified about?" August pointed to the beheaded corpse. The guards, stunned, approached the body and asked, "Did you kill him?" Aug shook his head. "No, Shin Wolford did." Alone. For a moment, silence fell. Then, the students and guards erupted in cheers, chanting Shin's name. In that instant, Shin Wolford became known to all as the hero who defeated the demon alone. The next morning, as the students were at school, Strom stood silently at the site of the battle, observing the aftermath with a glint of satisfaction in his eyes. It seems the experiment was indeed a success, he whispered to himself. Meanwhile, Shin sat in a room with Aug, lost in thought, replaying everything that had happened the day before. In a quiet voice, he asked, "Can a human really turn into a demon that easily? No, there's definitely something unnatural about all this." His mind returned to the battle scene, remembering how Kato spoke clearly and logically, even after his complete transformation. Shin thought to himself, "I'm sure there's someone behind all of this." Determined, Shin went to inform Merlin about what had happened, but upon arrival, he was surprised to find King Decion there, who had come personally to honor Shin for defeating the demon on his own. However, Merlin didn't seem pleased. He clearly didn't want Shin to be involved with the government or the military, fearing that tragedies might repeat themselves. The king explained, "At the very first appearance of a demonic human, our army was annihilated. No one could stop him, and the people lived in constant fear. Now, a new demon has emerged and has been defeated. The people must know who their savior is so that they can finally feel safe." Gradually, Merlin began to understand the situation. The king stepped forward and bowed in respect, asking for his permission. Merlin eventually agreed, but with a stern warning, "If I ever feel that you intend to drag Shin into the military or the government, I will take him and leave this country immediately." The king smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, that will never happen." As Shin walked through the capital, people stared at him with admiration. He was the hero who had single-handedly defeated the demon. A group of girls watched enviously as Maria and Cicely proudly walked beside Shin. One of them even whispered aloud, "Is one of them his fiancé?" Cicely overheard and blushed deeply. Shin, noticing her embarrassment, apologized. "I'm sorry if people's words are bothering you." She smiled and replied, "Don't worry, everything's fine. In fact, I'm very happy." Eventually, they arrived at the academy where large crowds of students had gathered, all wanting to join Shin's group. The teacher looked on in astonishment, thinking to himself, "If I let all of them in, there won't be anyone left in the other divisions." So he decided to hold an entrance exam. In the end, only 2 passed. A boy named Mark, the son of a famous blacksmith, and a girl named Olivia, whose family owned a sweet bakery. The existing members welcomed them warmly. Shin approached Mark and asked him to forge a new sword for him. Mark, startled, said, "I doubt I can craft a sword that could rival the one you used to slay that demon." Shin reassured him with a calm smile. "That was just an ordinary sword. I only enhanced it with a high-speed vibration enchantment. That's what allowed it to cut through anything. All I need now is a sharp, solid weapon I can fight with." Mark nodded enthusiastically. "All right, I'll craft exactly what you need." Elsewhere, King Decion had already put a secret plan into motion to uncover who was behind the transformation of humans into demons. His main suspect, Strom, he sent 2 top-ranking officers to interrogate him, but Strom appeared completely detached, almost as if his mind were elsewhere. To avoid revealing anything, the officers began their questioning. One asked how Strom could see through the cloth covering his eyes. Strom calmly replied that he used a type of magic, but one of the officers, incredibly sharp and perceptive, started asking questions in a roundabout way, until Strom slipped up and revealed too much. "I never expected Cardo to turn into a demon and die." The officer immediately responded, "Then come with us. We'd like you to see the scene. We've heard you're a high-ranking magician. You may be helpful in our investigation." Strom agreed to go with them. At the same time, Shin and his friends were busy discussing the design of the new sword. They finalized the plan and began crafting it. Meanwhile, the soldiers escorted Strom to the security headquarters. Strom was slightly surprised but didn't resist. He continued walking until he entered a large courtyard, only to find himself surrounded by soldiers on all sides. Confused, he asked, "What is going on? Why am I surrounded?" The commander stepped forward and said, "The king ordered us to keep Carto's identity secret to protect his family from disgrace, but you knew his name without anyone ever telling you. That proves your involvement." Strom let out a mocking laugh. "I thought this kingdom was in chaos, but clearly you're more organized than I gave you credit for." "Well done." Then with a smirk, he added, "In any case, I'm done with my experiments here. It's time for me to leave." The commander shouted, "Guards, seize him." Meanwhile, Shin and his friends were walking through the city, heading to continue crafting the sword, when suddenly they felt a violent tremor shake the nearby wall. Rushing toward the source, they discovered Strom completely surrounded, but none of the soldiers dared to approach him. One of the officers cried out, "That's the man who turned Carto into a demon." Hearing those words, Shin's fury exploded. "So it was him? He's the reason I was forced to kill a human." In a burst of rage, Shin launched a ferocious attack towards Strom with overwhelming force. Strom quickly raised a magical barrier and dodged. But Shin didn't stop. He shattered the ground beneath Strom, trying to throw him off balance. Then, Strom suddenly flew into the sky. Shin was stunned. It was the first time he had ever seen flight magic. Without hesitation, he activated the magical device attached to his leg and took off after him. In midair, Shin struck, slicing the cloth that covered Strom's eyes. And there it was, Strom's glowing red eye. He was a demon too. Enraged, Strom shouted, "I wanted to keep my identity hidden, but you ruined everything. Don't think you'll leave here alive." But before he could finish his threat, Shin unleashed a powerful spell, combining sunlight into a concentrated blast and hurling it directly at Strom. If he struck him dead on, and Strom vanished, disintegrating into nothingness. Yet even though Strom had disappeared, Shin felt something was off. As if this wasn't truly the end, one of the officers approached him, placing a hand on his shoulder and saying with pride, "Hold your head high, hero. You saved us all. Do not grieve." Another officer stepped forward, asking how he had done it. Shin explained how he had used sunlight as an offensive energy source, astonishing everyone with his quick thinking, immense strength, and decisive action. And so, the day came to an end. Shin returned home accompanied by his companions. On their way, they encountered Melda, who approached Maria and whispered to her, "Is there something between Shin and Cicely?" Maria replied with a calm smile. "They do harbor feelings for each other, but Shin has yet to confess, and Cicely, despite the many who have professed their love to her, always turn them down. It seems Shin is her first true love. How lucky you are, Shin." Soon after, everyone began preparing to head to the blacksmith to craft a special sword for Shin. As they walked, Shin appeared somewhat disturbed. Og noticed this and asked, "What's the matter? Is something bothering you?" Shin replied with a tone of concern, "I repeated the same spell I used against Strom, but this time, it didn't create glass. It only formed a hole. I feel like something's wrong." Og thought for a moment, then said, "No worries. Listen, man. Just head to the blacksmith and choose everything you need for your sword. Don't worry about the cost. The state will handle it. You're the only one capable of confronting Strom if he ever returns. You must be fully prepared." They finally arrived at the workshop, where they met Mark and Olivia. It was clear that something special was developing between them. Shin went with Mark to begin work on the sword, while Olivia stayed with the rest of the students. Upon entering, Mark's father was angry at him for calling out while he was working, but once he learned that it was the prince himself who had summoned him, his anger subsided, and he welcomed them with great respect. Aug then introduced Shin to him, and when the blacksmith discovered that Shin was the young man who had defeated the demon alone, he was utterly stunned. When Shin requested a sword with specific attributes, the blacksmith's heart filled with joy and pride. After all, he was to forge the weapon of the nation's hero, a task that would bring immense prestige to his workshop. Elsewhere, in a different empire, the king was speaking with one of his men, who informed him that Ars Haido had been left in complete ruin after the demon's assault. "I see. Good," the king responded, then immediately gave the order to launch an attack. The man left, a wicked smile curling on his face, concealing dark intentions. Back to Shin, who had finished everything at the blacksmith's. By that time, the girls had also wrapped up their conversation. Before leaving, Shin asked Mark if they crafted anything else in the workshop. Mark replied that they could also make decorative items if he wished. Shin turned to Cicely and told her he wanted to gift her something. Her face blushed deeply with surprise, and she looked stunningly beautiful. He took her inside and asked her to choose something she liked, but she simply said, "You choose for me." He decided to give her a ring and engraved a special protection spell onto it. He slipped it onto her finger himself, and her happiness was indescribable. What a majestic moment it was. Beauty and emotion intertwined. The time came for Shin to be awarded the Medal of Honor. After defeating the demons, he entered the Grand Hall and accepted the medal with great humility. Then the king ascended the stage and addressed the audience. "This is Shin. I promised both the wise man and the wise woman, when I summoned him here, that I would never use him for any political purpose. And today, before you all, I reaffirm that promise." Shin looked at the king with admiration and thought to himself, "This is what a true king is." Next morning, Shin headed to school, but his fans were everywhere, so he used the magic gate to teleport directly. Upon arrival, the students were amazed by his incredible magic. However, when he began to explain how it worked, no one understood a word. Still, it was clear that Shin had something in mind. He gathered all the students and told them, "You must increase your magical power. Otherwise, in any future battle, you may lose your lives if you're unprepared." No one understood what he meant, so he asked Maria to cast a barrier spell. The barrier was fragile and easily destroyed. He then called upon Cicely and asked her to use the ring he gave her to form a similar barrier. Her shield was extremely powerful, comprised of 2 solid layers. Shin explained that he had once used that same barrier to repel a deadly poison attack. Though they didn't fully grasp it, the students were clearly convinced by the demonstration. He decided to show them more practically, so he released a portion of his magical energy, caused the entire place to tremble. The students realized then they were standing before a power beyond imagination. As for Strom, it turned out he was still alive, residing in an unknown location within the other empire, laughing wickedly, foreshadowing a new wave of evil to come. At the same time, Shin took the students to the home of the wise man and wise woman to teach them more about magic. Marlin began explaining Shin's way of thinking and his extraordinary skills, affirming just how gifted he truly was. Marlin then performed the gate spell, just like Shin usually did, shocking Shin himself, as he didn't know Marlin had mastered such magic. The students were amazed and their excitement grew. They were beginning to understand the greatness of Shin's magic. As for Melda, she understood the true reason behind Marlin's actions. He didn't want people to view Shin as a supernatural being or someone from another world. The next day, while the students were at school, they continued their special training. Its effects had begun to show clearly on their bodies. Shin's sword was finally completed, so he went to collect it and purchased protective gear for everyone to keep them safe during battles. Suddenly, August approached him and asked, "What do you think about equipping our army with more swords like yours?" Shin replied, "That was Tony's idea. If he agrees, I have no objection." Al gadded, "The war is about to begin, and if the battle intensifies, we may need to involve the students in combat as well. Except for you, of course. That's forbidden by royal decree." Shin answered firmly, "It's true I won't be fighting directly with you, but if you're in danger, I'll be there, because you are my friends, and I can't abandon you." A few days later, the war erupted. The king of the Second Empire, known as Bolosivia, was in a state of extreme rage. His forces had begun to suffer heavy losses, and the intelligence he received about Ars Haido turned out to be false. He screamed furiously, "I'll have my revenge, Zest. I'll cut your head off." Zest was the one who had misled him with false reports, claiming that Ars Haido was engulfed in chaos. At that moment, a guard rushed into the room and informed the king of a disaster that had struck the kingdom. Demonic beasts had suddenly appeared and begun attacking civilians. The king was horrified and immediately ordered his soldiers to withdraw and defend the citizens. Meanwhile, in Ars Haido, the situation was entirely different. They had achieved a resounding victory. The commander began to seriously consider pursuing the retreating enemy forces to eliminate them completely. Suddenly, one of the guards came rushing in, shouting, "Demonic beasts have attacked the front lines of our army. Many soldiers have been injured." The commander was struck with disbelief and cried out in shock, "What in heaven's name is happening?" We return now to the empire of Volosivia, where the demonic beasts had invaded the entire city. The streets were no longer safe, nor were the homes. Screams of terror echoed from every direction, and in the midst of the chaos, Strom walked calmly beside a woman named Mira, whom he had turned into a demon with his own hands. It was soon revealed that this destruction was all part of Strom's grand scheme. He had instructed Zest to send false information to the king, luring him to attack Arsal Haido, thereby weakening his army in a misguided battle, and once the soldiers returned, wounded and exhausted, Strom would strike and seize the kingdom for himself. And indeed, when the king returned to his homeland, he found nothing but ruins. The city was obliterated, the people slaughtered, everything reduced to ashes. He walked into his palace with heavy steps, unable to believe what he saw, and there, he found Strom waiting for him, seated upon his throne, smirking with contempt. Mockingly, Strom said, "Welcome back, your majesty." Then, without hesitation, he immobilized the king with magic, and with a single movement, ended his life. Thus, Strom officially declared himself the new ruler of the Bolosivia Empire. We return now to Arsulhaido's army, which had reached the borders of the empire. There, the troops stood in shock at the catastrophic sight before them, homes reduced to rubble, corpses scattered everywhere, and the air thick with cries of sorrow and despair. Suddenly, Strom's voice echoed through the air. "Welcome to the capital. Such an honor to have you here." The commander immediately realized that everything they had suffered was the result of Strom's cunning deception. As he turned, he was met with an overwhelming sight, vast hordes of demons advancing from the horizon. In that moment, the commander made a swift decision to retreat with his forces in order to preserve their lives. They returned to Arsulhaido, and the commander recounted everything he had witnessed to the king. The king replied, "Retreating was the right choice." A state of emergency was declared across the kingdom, and the looming threat from the west was made known to all. With the number of demonic beasts increasing rapidly, it became necessary for the students of the Magic Academy to grow stronger and more prepared than ever before. At this point, their teacher appeared and delivered the harsh truth. Strom is still alive, and he has taken over the Bolosivia Empire. Thus, it was decided that all students would undergo intense training. This time, in collaboration with the Night Academy, everyone agreed, but tension lingered in the air, for the magic students had always been mocked by the knights, who looked down on them as weak and insignificant. Shin tried to explain the purpose behind this alliance, but his words fell on deaf ears. Eventually, students from both academies were grouped together, and each carriage was shared by 4 students from each school. Once seated, the knight students began introducing themselves, their arrogance evident. One of them said, "We won't need the mages in battle anyway." Again, Shin attempted to explain the value of teamwork and unity, but again, it was in vain. One girl even insulted him directly. "Don't get cocky just because you defeated a demon." Hearing this, Org smirked and said, "All right then, Shin, don't kill any demons. Let them prove their worth." Shin replied calmly, "As you wish." They arrived at the enchanted forest, where Zeke and Chris were the assigned supervisors, both widely respected by the students. Org explained to them what had happened and added, "We'll let the knights show us what they can do." After just a few minutes of walking, massive demonic boar suddenly attacked. The night students charged in, but were unable to stop. They were swiftly overwhelmed and severely injured. Upon seeing this, Shin rushed forward without hesitation and eliminated the beast in an instant, exposing the immense gap between him and the others. Cecily quickly ran to the fallen students and began healing them, her compassion shining through every gesture. The night students, now humbled, approached and apologized for their earlier behavior. Tensions eased and harmony began to grow between the two groups. However, Shin couldn't hide his jealousy towards Cecily, who was now receiving warmth and attention from the knights. Soon after, 2 students came running to Zeke shouting, "Take the squad and run now. More than 100 demonic beasts are heading this way." Shin turned to Zeke and said, "Let me face them alone." After a brief moment of hesitation, Zeke replied, "Very well, but be careful." Everyone was terrified, hearts pounding with fear at the approaching horde, but Shin stood tall, summoned a devastating spell, and annihilated all the monsters in mere seconds. At that moment, the night students finally understood the power of the mage they had mocked. The same girl who had insulted him before stepped forward and apologized, then turned to Cecily and said, "I'm sorry I insulted your boyfriend." Both their faces turned red instantly, and everyone realized the truth about their feelings. It was a deeply awkward yet endearing moment. From that point on, the team began to cooperate fully, understood the value of the up, and the knights came to recognize that magic was just as vital as the sword. Later, Zeke approached Shin and said, "Your squad's level is exceptional. You may be the best mages in the entire empire." Shin answered modestly, "Maybe. I'm the one training them after all, but the most important thing is humility." Zeke then asked, "Would you allow me to join your team?" Before Shin could respond, Org intervened, "You're a part of the military. Joining them could spark political issues." Zeke accepted this and asked, "Anything new I should know?" Org replied, "Here's my advice. Increase your magical energy every single day. That's the key to becoming powerful. Look at the barriers Maria and Cecily created. Far stronger than before. Thanks to their training and growth, Zeke was amazed by their progress, and so was the rest of the squad, who now worked in perfect harmony. Yet despite all this success, a shadow of sadness lingered on Shin's face. He said quietly, "I feel like teaching you this kind of magic may have changed the course of your lives, and might bring you trouble one day." Org nodded and said, "You're right, you'll likely become an elite unit in the future, and that kind of power will attract the attention of other nations." But everyone replied in unison, "We're proud of what we've become. You've shown us the way, Shin." At that moment, Shin smiled, an honest, joyful smile, and for the first time in a long while, he felt happy again. And then he took them all to the training ground, and it became clear that the boys had grown significantly stronger. Og said, "No one must know about these guys," to which Shin replied, "Don't worry, man. This is a place I used to train in, and no one has ever come here before." At that moment, Og gathered everyone and said, "I want to tell you something, a state secret, but I'll tell you because you are no longer just ordinary people." Then he told them what had happened in the Second Empire, the destruction, the slaughter that occurred, and all the boys stood there shocked and saddened. He told them, with every attack, the number of demons grows more and more. It seems we'll have to face them very soon. Upon hearing this, Shin thought to himself, "I wonder, what is Strom planning?" Then Shin decided they should set up a summer training camp, and everyone agreed to the idea and welcomed it. But they stopped at the issue of where they would spend the night, and they settled on Cecily's house, since her family owned hot springs. After training, the boys would be able to relax. Now we move to Shin telling Merlin and Melda about the camp. They liked the idea and approved it, but Melda told him that she would go with them as a supervisor, because boys and girls shouldn't be together without supervision. Merlin also decided to go with them to help in the training, and indeed, everyone got ready, boarded the carriages, and set off to Cecily's family home. Along the way, they encountered a group of magical beasts that had become very weak in comparison to their current strength. One of the female members of the team managed to take them down in seconds. The effects of training were clear. They had become much stronger. They finally arrived at Cecily's house, and everyone welcomed her return warmly. Everything was fine. They all entered the hot springs to relax, and Merlin said to them, "Thank you all for becoming Shin's friends." He added, "When he was young, he was always alone, and I thought he would remain that way forever. But now I'm happy that he has friends he can rely on." The boys were very happy with those words, and Og said, "No, we're the ones who are happy that Shin is our friend." He continued, "I've always been part of the royal family, and I never found anyone who treated me like a normal person. Until I met Shin, he treated me like a cousin, without ever making me feel like I was a prince or anything of the sort." The rest also praised Shin, and Shin said to his grandfather, "I would have never had friends if it weren't for you, Grandpa. I'm grateful for everything you've taught me." The old man was deeply touched and began to cry with joy, and so the day came to an end. Next day, everyone started training. Merlin supervised them, and Melda also taught them how to craft magical tools. Shin was very happy that his family was supporting him, and he said, "As long as everyone is powering up, I should raise my power too." The boys panicked and backed away from him. Shin told them, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." Then he began preparing his spell and set up a shield to protect them from the shock. The spell was incredibly powerful, and everyone was terrified by its intensity. Then, the area exploded, and the spell took out 4 mountains along with it. Even Melda screamed at Shin for what he had done to the mountains, but everyone was happy, and the training ended at that point. After the training, Aog asked Shin to take him to the palace so he could learn more about the demons and stay up to date with what was happening in the kingdom. What a diligent prince he truly is. Indeed, Shin took him to the palace, and as soon as they arrived, they found a girl standing before them. By the way, she was Aog's fiancée. She began to introduce herself to Shin with full respect and said to him, "Aog, you're lounging at a resort and leaving me here? I'm coming with you, step for step." As if you were just there for fun. But did it end there? No, my friend. Aog's sister also said, "I'm coming with you." That's because she liked Melda and admired her. What a camp this had become, more like a field trip. Aog wasn't on board with the idea, but the king gave them permission and asked him to take them along as a break from routine. A truly refined family. Indeed, Shin took them to the city using his teleportation magic, and they strolled around together for a bit, but Ellie was annoyed with Aog because he always talked about Shin in the palace. Shin, and never mentioned anyone else. Aog said to her, "I feel like I'm at home when I'm with Shin." She got upset and said, "So you don't feel at home with me?" He replied, "No, when I'm with you, I feel peace of mind." Ellie was deeply touched and liked what he said. Then they went to a restaurant, and while they were passing by, Aog said to Shin, "Aren't you going to confess to Cecily? Come on, man, or what?" Shin got flustered and said, "Who told you she loves me?" Aog responded, "My friend, it's obvious, and everyone knows." Shin said, "What if she rejects me?" Aog replied, "Don't worry, everything will be fine." Anyway, they arrived at Cecily's house for introductions, and Shin was very nervous. Everyone began getting to know Ellie and Mai, and Shin told his grandmother that Mai admired her. Melda went up to her, held her hand, and said, "Girls' hands are beautiful, unlike Shin's when he was little." Shin was extremely embarrassed, and everyone agreed with the grandmother's words, until Cecily blurted out hysterically without thinking, "I'd be happy holding our children's hands." She meant her and Shin's children together. Everyone looked at her in shock, amazed by how straightforward and clever she was. When Cecily realized what she had just said, said. She became incredibly shy, her face turned red, and she ran away. Og went to Shin and said, "Now's your chance. You need to confess your love to her before you embarrass her any further." And indeed, while Shin was strolling outside at night, he found Cecily sitting there as well. So he approached her to talk. He stood before her, his heartbeat racing intensely. Cecily then said, "I'm sorry if I upset you with what I said inside." Shin replied, "No, I was actually very happy. Do you remember the first time I saw you, Cecily?" She answered, "Of course I do." He said, "When I first saw you, I thought to myself, this girl is incredibly beautiful, sweet, and wonderful." Cecily responded, "And when I first saw you, I thought you were a handsome and strong young man." Shin mustered all his courage and said to her, "I love you." The girl was overwhelmed with joy and began to cry, saying, "I thought you were just kind to me like everyone else, but now you're telling me that you love me." Then she added, "I love you too." The atmosphere turned completely serene and filled with joy. Shin asked her to be his girlfriend, and of course, she agreed, but before they could even finish their conversation, they discovered that everyone had been watching them from afar, an absolute scandal, and so Shin and Cecily officially announced that they were now a couple. Oh, what beauty, man. The next day, Shin and Cecily woke up clearly embarrassed by what had happened the previous night. Cecily told him they needed to inform her family, as she didn't like doing things behind their backs. So, Shin took her to her family's house to explain everything. He was extremely nervous as he sat down and told her father that he loved his daughter, that she had allowed him to date her, and that he was here to seek their permission. The father was genuinely pleased that Shin had chosen his daughter, which surprised Shin. But Cecily's mother then asked him to sit down and said, "We are a respectable family and we won't allow you to go out with our daughter unless you're formally engaged." Shin agreed with her words and accepted the engagement. What a man, honestly. Their daughter was overjoyed and cried because she had gotten engaged to the one she loved. She blushed deeply, but her happiness was overwhelming. We now return to the youth training, where they had become incredibly powerful, and their magical energy had increased significantly. This astonished both Ellie and May. Unlike Ellie, May also possessed the qualities necessary to become a strong mage. We shift to Strom, who was seated in the Empire of Bolsevia. Mira informed him that they were on the verge of wiping out the kingdom entirely. He replied, "All right." Back to Shin, who began learning a new type of magic. Everyone was afraid and set up protective barriers to shield themselves, but Shin reassured them, saying the magic wasn't offensive, so they took the barriers down again. Shin then managed to use flight magic and made stones float in the air, shocking everyone. They could hardly believe their eyes. They were even more stunned when he flew himself like Strom. This would give him much more freedom in future battles. When Shin returned home, he told Melita and Merlin what had happened, and that he was now engaged to Cecily. He apologized for doing it without informing them, but Melita and Merlin were very understanding. They asked Cecily to go with them to her family's house immediately to talk things through, and indeed Melita and Merlin arrived and sat with the family. Melita began speaking and told them everything about Shin, that he wasn't truly her grandson. She did this to see if Cecily's family would accept him for who he was, rather than for being their grandson, to avoid shocking them if they learned the truth later. The father replied that he didn't approve of Shin because he was Melita's grandson or anything like that, but because he saw someone who truly loved Cecily and cared for her. Cecily also said she loved Shin and hadn't thought of it in that way at all. Oh, the beauty of it. What an emotional moment. Both families were overjoyed with this wonderful occasion, and Shin thanked his grandfather and grandmother for raising him and everything they had done for him. A date was set for their official engagement, and the world suddenly felt perfect. Returning to the youth's training, Shin had brought them new uniforms enchanted with his magic, adding several features such as heat resistance, faster healing, and more. He did all of this because they were about to begin their real training, facing monsters from the Calamity class, which were among the most powerful demonic beasts. The youths were exhausted, but Shin reassured them, saying, "Don't worry, you're strong now." And indeed, the group went down to train and faced a giant demonic lion. Shin selected 5 of them to fight it first. Though they were afraid, they overcame their fear and managed to defeat these and wipe from existence. The others began to feel encouraged as well, and each one began defeating a demonic beast on their own. Things were going absolutely great. Days passed and the time came for Shin and Cecily's engagement ceremony. Shin stood in front of the mirror getting ready, and Cecily entered. What a sight to behold. Her beauty was indescribable. Shin stood there mesmerized by his bride's appearance and said to her, "If the moon saw your beauty right now, it would burn from jealousy." But of course, beautiful moments are always fleeting. Cecily's mother entered and said, "Everyone is waiting for you outside." The two of them stepped out in their magnificent appearance. The king and everyone stood watching them, and their engagement was officially announced. Everyone celebrated and rejoiced, and the ceremony came to an end. But after the ceremony, while Shin and Cecily were alone, he surprised her with a ring and said, "I know I'm ruining the order a bit, but would you accept to be my wife?" Cecily agreed, and he placed the ring on her finger. Cecily was filled with joy. Such incredibly beautiful moments. And the day came to a close. On the following morning, all the boys were flying in the sky. And of course, that was because Shin had cast a flight spell on them. They began to control it using wind magic, and the weather was absolutely wonderful. Then Shin called them using a microphone he had invented himself, asking them to land, and everyone was deeply impressed by Shin's inventions. Now, we move on to Strom and his followers. Mira said to him, "We've now nearly wiped out the entire empire, and the demons have seized every village from the smallest to the largest. Naturally, this caused a massive increase in the number of demons lately. So Strom gathered the demons and began celebrating his victory. It seemed he no longer intended to do anything else, as his primary goal had been to overthrow the kingdom of Bolosevia. But one of the demons shouted, 'We won't stop here. We must continue killing, looting, and invading.' Strom replied, 'Do as you wish. But don't involve me. Whoever wants to join you, let them go.' Indeed, a group of demons headed toward the town next to the kingdom of Arsalhaido, which, by the way, is called Swede, intending to destroy it and kill its people. But there was something strange. Mira asked Strom, 'Why do you hate Bolosevia so much?' He replied, 'Oh right. I never told you my story,' and he began to tell it. Before he became a demon, his name was Oliveira, a wealthy and respectable man who cared for everyone, poor before rich, and treated all people equally without belittling anyone or favoring one over another. That's why Oliveira was extremely popular. One day, a farmer asked him, 'Why do you do this? You're rich, yet you treat farmers as your equals.' Oliveira replied, 'When I was young, I used to notice the difference in how the rich and poor were treated in our land, but when I visited a neighboring kingdom, I was stunned by the beauty of the relationships there. No racism, everyone treated equally, and life was beautiful. So I decided to live and treat people that way, to improve the empire.' Oliveira was no ordinary man. He was among the candidates for ruling the kingdom. One day, Oliveira returned home in the evening. His wife welcomed him, showing signs of pregnancy in her final month, and they were both extremely happy. But, as you know, happiness never lasts forever, my friend. A group of nobles gathered to discuss Oliveira, including King Hydra. They were all angry at Oliveira's actions and his principles that promoted equality between rich and poor. They said, 'We must eliminate him before he takes the throne. Otherwise, we'll all be treated the same.' Hydra agreed and decided to devise a plan to get rid of Oliveira permanently. The first step was to have the nobles lure him to the capital, where Hydra would deal with him directly. Indeed, they sent Oliveira a letter telling him they supported his idea of equality among the people and wished to discuss it with him in the capital. When Oliveira read the letter, he was overjoyed and decided to go to them eagerly, unaware of the trap set for him. His wife was worried and said, 'Be careful.' He replied, 'Don't worry, I'm strong and I'll protect myself,' then left. While he was on his way to the capital, Hydra began executing his evil plan. He ordered the kidnapping of several women from Oliveira's village and then sent some of his men to accuse Oliveira of the crime. Of course, he wasn't there to defend himself. People began to talk, though they didn't yet believe it. But then Oliveira decided to return to his hometown to see his wife, whom he missed dearly. However, Hydra had already prepared everything to make this his end. He placed the kidnapped women in a cart marked with Oliveira's name and had the farmers capture it. At that moment, the farmers were enraged and decided to take revenge. They took torches in hand, went to his house, set it on fire, and killed his wife. Oliveira was on his way back, and when he saw the fire near his home, he rushed toward it. When he arrived, he was shocked by the scene. He ran to his wife, but she had already passed away. He wept, saying, 'Is this my reward for being kind to you? Is this my reward, that you kill my wife and my unborn child?' The farmers responded, 'You kidnapped the women and sold them as slaves.' At that moment, Oliveira realized it had all been a conspiracy against him. His rage ignited, and he swore to annihilate the kingdom entirely. He unleashed a spell filled to Yaoi, transformed into a demon, and slaughtered all the villagers in seconds. And that, my friend, is Strom's story. Honestly, I was deeply moved and sympathized with him. Now, we return to Zest, who wasn't pleased that Strom no longer had a purpose in life. After achieving his goal and destroying the empire, he no longer intended to do anything. So, Zest ordered one of his followers to track the demons heading to the town near Arsalhaido. Suspecting that Shin might be there to defend it, he wanted to assess his strength. The man agreed immediately. We return once again to the empire of Arsalhaido, where Oog is being appointed as crown prince at that moment, and of course, he truly deserves it. But during the coronation, a soldier burst into the hall and told the king, "There is a demon army that has appeared in the kingdom of Swede." Everyone panicked and anxiety spread throughout the place, but Og was able to control the situation. He assured everyone that a special unit had been prepared to confront the demons. fully ready and that they had undergone intensive training under the supervision of Shin, grandson of the two heroes and the demon's conqueror. He then asked Shin to deliver a passionate speech to the people. Shin reassured them, telling them they would protect the kingdom from any invasion and that nothing would harm them. Everyone cheered joyfully and proudly, and in a powerful moment, Shin soared into the sky, a truly stunning scene. While Shin and his companions were on their way, the demons had already reached the borders of the kingdom of Swede. The border guards sent a signal to the rest of the soldiers to be alert and prepare for the demon attack. Indeed, the soldiers began preparing for defense, along with the mages and all other arrangements. They also sent one of the soldiers to the kingdom of Arsulhaido to bring reinforcements from Merlin and Melda, as they were still unaware of Shin's unit. But the number of demons was extremely large, over 100. Given their strength and numbers, the soldiers couldn't hold them back. The demons managed to break into the capital and began spreading throughout the kingdom, destroying homes and killing the inhabitants. At the same time, Shin and his companions were walking along the road. Shin divided them into groups, each consisting of 2 individuals except for Cecily, who was alone, as she would be responsible for treating the wounded and would not participate in combat. What a noble young man. Now we move on to the demons, who seem to have invaded the entire kingdom. A mother was trying to escape with her daughter, but the demons were right behind her, leaving her no chance to flee. Just before they struck her down, Shin suddenly appeared and landed a powerful kick on one of them, sending him flying. He then reassured the mother and daughter and took out the remaining demons who were attacked. He told her that reinforcements had arrived and that the kingdom would be safe. The mother felt relieved and rejoiced, and then they continued on their way. At that moment, Shin was speaking with Cecily. One of Zest's soldiers, named Lawrence, was hiding from sight, sneaking around so that Shin wouldn't notice him because he wanted to test his abilities. It seems things are about to get intense. Og climbed to the highest point in the kingdom, held a microphone, and reassured the soldiers and citizens, saying, "Do not worry, you are safe, because we, the ultimate magicians, will protect you." Then he threatened the demons inside the city, declaring, "You will now be crushed." The people of the kingdom rejoiced, cheers rang out, and the battle between the demons and the magicians began. The magicians' energy surged dramatically, and the demons were unable to do a thing. Every 2 magicians went after a single demon and defeated him. A group of demons headed toward the hospital where Cecily was, intending to kill her, but Shin had anticipated this, so he had assigned Mark and Olivia to guard her. Indeed, they succeeded in defeating the demons and protecting her. Meanwhile, Shin was facing demons alone, destroying them left and right, and no one could stand in his way. Lawrence, the stealthy soldier from Zest, was watching the scene in terror at Shin's overwhelming power, and said, "What is this? No one can keep up with him." Due to the massive amount of magical energy he possessed, we now move to August and Maria, who were confronting the demon leader. They tried to speak with him to understand his motives, but he only wanted destruction. Maria attempted a surprise attack, but it was futile. He lied dead, but the armor she wore protected her. Though she was still injured, enraged, Maria launched an all-out attack, but he blocked her with a magical artifact he had obtained from one of the soldiers. Aug looked at Maria, and they decided to attack him together with several consecutive straws, which eventually shattered his magical berry. Before the demon could utter a word, the royal Kundra spear pierced his heart. At that time, the king began to feel reassured and said, "It seems the battle is nearing its end." A truly kind king, by the way. Zest was observing the battle from afar and said, "I must rethink everything," after witnessing Shin's overwhelming power. He then decided to gather the demons and retreat. To make the retreat successful, he summoned Mira for backup. Mira arrived in the kingdom, destroyed the gate, and incinerated everything in her path. She said, "Let anyone who dares come forward." It seems the battle is about to get even fiercer. We return to Cecily, who was treating the wounded. She managed to heal many of them, but suddenly, a woman came to her crying desperately, begging, "Please save my husband, I'll do anything." Cecily rushed to treat him. He was severely wounded and bleeding profusely. She cast a spell to stop the bleeding, but the wound was too deep, and it seemed she wouldn't be able to save him. Back to Shin, who sensed Mira's immense energy. She was fending off the guards, and Noah stalked her. 2 members of Shin's squad approached her, but she repelled all their attacks. Even when one of the girls cast a spell she thought had finished Mira off, Mira countered and brought her down. Lawrence seized the moment and cast a spell to alert the demons that they must retreat immediately. They agreed and began fleeing. But to where? Shin used his most powerful spell. It was like firing a laser beam and wiped out most of them. Although some managed to protect the soldiers and escape, Shin thought about chasing them, but he sensed that he had to go to the source of the immense magical energy. At the same time, Mira had turned some of the team members into what looked like potatoes from the sheer beating. 2 others joined the fight, but it was Shibum. No one to Stavro. She was about to finish off one of the girls when Shin's voice came from behind. "Stay where you are." The girl was overjoyed at his arrival. Shin looked at his injured comrades, and rage filled him. One of the girls said to him, "Be careful, she's strong." he replied, but I'm stronger. He charged at Mira with all scream. She tried to retell him, but Shin tore part of her clothes as he attacked her. His team joined in to help him, and Mira seemed cornered. Lawrence appeared and said to her, use explosive magic, obliterate them. The girl flew into the air, grabbed Maria, and struck her hard. Then she ascended higher and unleashed a massive spell. Shin saw that his friends wouldn't be able to block it, so he shouted at the top of his lungs, I will protect you all. He created a massive magical barrier and successfully pushed the explosion away. After the blast, none of the demons remained in the area. Shin then looked at his companions and was relieved that they were safe. They began discussing Mira, and Og said, her power was strange. It seems there's a secret behind it. The demons had withdrawn, sorrowful in defeat. Strom, who had been watching everything, said, it seems you'll be entertaining Shin. We returned to Shin, who went to check on Cecily. He was shocked by the number of injured and asked the students to come help. Cecily was completely drained, her magical energy nearly depleted, and she could no longer stop the bleeding. She cried, saying, magic isn't doing anything. She felt hopeless, but in that moment, Shin arrived and said, don't worry, I'll take care of it. He cast a legendary healing spell that identified the injuries and repaired them. Og was watching and said, truly, no one can match you, Shin. The spell worked, and the man returned to a stable condition. Cecily approached Shin and thanked him, saying, you always support me when I'm weak? He replied, no, it's thanks to you. You managed to stop the bleeding until now. She then looked at those she had healed and saw them thanking her. She was overjoyed, and everything returned to normal. After the battle ended, Aug went to the king and asked him to form an alliance between the two kingdoms to eradicate the demons. The king agreed after witnessing their true power. Aug then sent the team back, but Shin seemed sad and said, if I had opened the gate here from the start, the number of casualties would have been lower, but he didn't know that opening a gate to a place he had never visited was impossible. Aug said to him, I was about to say the same thing. Let's protect the kingdom together, my friend. Merlin and Melda were watching and looked absolutely delighted. They returned to the kingdom of Earlside and were welcomed with grand celebrations. Aug presented a report to the queen about everything that had happened and informed her that he had formed an alliance with the kingdom of Swede. The king was convinced by his words and appointed him as a liaison between the two nations. Aug then asked the king for permission to travel with Shin to form alliances with the remaining human kingdoms. The king approved his decision. He then asked Merlin and Melda to join, and they agreed as well. The entire team gathered the next day, bid farewell to everyone, and set off on their new journey. And with that, Season 1 comes to an end. I hope it has delighted you all. Until next time.